That's what Evelyn, their cook at Greenoak, had told her before handing her an apron. "Here's your penny," and departing with her husband, Peachy, leaving Prue to cook and serve the first meal she'd created from start to finish, all by herself. Possibly not an enormously scary event to a 20-something entertaining a boyfriend in her first flat, but Prue had that 20-something beat by about 30 years. High time, she had decided, to take the plunge. Not to worry, Evelyn had said. Not a word had been spoken about Prue's first attempt at the pork chops, which had resulted in baked shoe leather sauced with charcoal. She'd got rid of the evidence and flung wide the windows and doors before her husband, Christopher, arrived home. Good thing Christopher had told her that morning he'd be working until past 7 o'clock. Good thing and just a wee bit suspicious, as he relished the couple of hours after his work at the Romsey Constabulary and before dinner. Often, he would ask Prue to take him through the garden to see the latest she and her brother Simon had got up to. He'd chat with Peachy, a mechanic, about old cars. He'd stroll over to the Robber Blackbird, their local pub, for a swift half-pint of ale. But this day, he'd said he had an online course to finish up, and he would see Prue just before dinner. Evelyn swore that she hadn't breathed a word about the identity of the cook for the evening. But Prue couldn't help thinking how convenient it was that she had this time to herself to fret over the pork chops. But if he did suspect, he'd kept it to himself. In a moment of reckless optimism, she had decided to cook a starter: almond-rolled goat's cheese balls with roasted beetroot. She and Christopher rarely had a starter course at home, and she hoped this wouldn't tip him off that something was amiss, that is, different, from any other evening when their meals were expertly cooked by Evelyn and left for them. Prue hoped that it would be only after the meal that she could reveal her surprise. "Ta-da! Your chef tonight has been—" There was also the damson plum crumble for pudding, which, thankfully, required no more than lining up the plum halves in a dish and mixing butter into oatmeal, flour, sugar, and a bit of cinnamon. Much like mixing up a fresh batch of potting soil, Prue decided. Anyone could have thrown that together. Why had she never done it before? Prue, although an excellent gardener, had never been a cook. But that hadn't fazed her husband, Christopher Pearse, in the least. Not from the beginning a few years ago, when they'd met in London during a murder-for-gain case he'd investigated as Detective Chief Inspector with the Metropolitan Police. Christopher. The same moment she heard him at the door of the mudroom, Prue looked down at her penny, smeared with purple-red beet juice and dotted with splashes of brown sizzled pork fat. Too blatant a clue, and so she whipped it off, took a frantic look round her, and, at the last second, stashed it in the nearest cupboard. With the back of her hand, she pushed a slightly frizzed brown tendril off her face, hoping her dinner surprise hadn't added another gray hair to the already alarming number that had started to appear, and met him as he stepped into the kitchen. He kissed her, and then put his nose in the air. "What's that fantastic smell?" She gave him a wary look. He didn't usually talk about dinner as soon as he walked in. Did he suspect something? Was it his detective nose, eyes, and brain that told him there had been a disturbance in the usual kitchen force? Or was it that he felt her nerves vibrating under his hands as he held her? "Oh, I believe it's baked pork chops and cider," she replied, "and a sauce." No sauce yet. She needed to cook it, and she certainly didn't want to do it under his gaze. "Why don't you go and change and find us a bottle of wine? I'll get out the plates. We've a starter, too," she added under her breath. He headed for their bedroom without comment, and she laid the kitchen table as usual. Prue had worried that if she tried to move them to the dining room, which they never used except for company, he would surely cotton on that this would be no ordinary dinner. She'd already arranged the starter on small plates and hidden them in the pantry, where they sat next to canisters of wholemeal flour and demerara sugar. Now she set